Okay, we're live. Well, welcome to the Binary Business Show. It's been a hot minute since we had one of these. My name is Logan Edmonds, CEO of TTS. I am joined here with one of our newest team members. Amy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Amy, and I work for TTS.
Woo! So, I've learned something about you when we first started working together. You're a fan of true crime podcasts, right? You like the whole true crime genre?
Love it.
Cool. What's some of the, why do you like, let me ask a question. Why do you like true crime? Like, just speaking out loud, why do you like it?
It's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about why I like it. I started off watching Murder, She Wrote with my grandmother when I was a kid, and kind of got me started there. Forensic Files, Unsolved Mysteries, and I feel like it's something that if I'm aware, it won't happen to me.
Okay. I like it. Awareness. I think it's fascinating too, because for me personally, some of the best and worst, I should say the worst human ingenuity you'll ever hear is in the true crime stuff, right? Like
Totally.
I see just the genius and how it can be directed towards the worst of us and the worst results for humankind as a whole. And it's morbid, and it is, but at the same time, it's fascinating, right? Like, Ted Bundy was not a not intelligent guy. He was just absolutely insane and evil. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think is fascinating. And so we're a cybersecurity company. I know you just started working for us, but I think you picked that up, right?
And I was interested in it because of the true crime genre. I kind of evolved into my playlist. And my preferences have changed over the last, 6 years or so. And it's kind of evolved into the cybercrime genre. It's very interesting to me. And I think that's why when the opportunity came about for me to work for TTS, I already have the interest there. And I know how important it is, especially if you've had your identity stolen or, have been a victim of cybercrime.
Absolutely.
Even if as an individual, not just a company, this just seemed like a natural fit for me because it's so interesting.
Absolutely. And what I'm starting to notice too is more and more people know someone this has impacted, right? Like it used to be the people who it's happened to were absolutely dialed in on this, but a lot of people didn't know anybody this had hit. Well, over the last 5 years, between scam artists, social media cons, and all kinds of nasty credit card stuff, I think more and more people know about, hey, identity theft, fraud. Like, if it hasn't happened to you, and I hope it hasn't, for those of you watching this, it's probably happened to somebody you know. Yeah. And so when we go into this, we have to ask ourselves the question, why is this happening so much? Well, one of the stats I think is kind of shocking, and we're seeing on a GPD per capita basis, we're seeing cybercrime eclipse the drug trade and profitability now. There's more money right now flowing through cyber criminals and the networks and their economies than there is in the drug economy. Which I don't know about you. That always, I looked at the numbers and they add up. Like when you look at all the stats and the amount of damages it costs, I just couldn't believe it. Right? Like
when I heard that, I mean, I am not a cybersecurity expert by any means. I could definitely win a true crime trivia contest probably or place in there. But as far as the cybercrime, I could not believe that stat. I mean, I believe it, but it was very shocking to me and very concerning. And I just, what do you do? What can we do about it?
I mean, and part of it, I think, might come down to romanticization. Like, we've understood how the drug trade inherently as a culture works, broad strokes, right? Like, we've had shows, who hasn't watched Breaking Bad, right? Like, we've seen, right? We get some idea and we're like, okay, that makes sense. But a lot of people hear that number and they go, okay, I see the statistics, I see the FBI notices, but how does it work, right? Like, where does all that money go? Like, what is the business model, right? I think is what people are really asking. I understand how a drug dealer, a drug producer, a cartel, broad strokes, they make money. I don't understand how cybercrime works. And that's fair. It's a newer thing. And we're going to talk about that today. So
very mysterious. There's a lot of mystique involved. And I think a lot of the interest for me personally is that, and why I think that other people like me in my demographic, and not necessarily my age bracket, but my, female, what my interests are, it's because they're so, especially listening to certain podcasts that we both listen to, Darknet Diaries, Malicious Life, Hacked. Those aren't just about business to business. Those are about human beings being defrauded out of money. And these aren't just fraudulent loans being taken out that they aren't going to be responsible for in the long run. These are people and companies that cash money is being taken from them and not replaced. How do you replace that?
Have you seen The Beekeeper yet? Have you seen that movie?
I have not.
Okay, it's what's his name? Jason Statham, the action guy, the British action guy.
Statham.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Name right. Jason
I have
Statham.
to see that.
This whole movie starts with like elderly people and scam artistry. So it's starting to pick up in our culture, I think, a little bit. By the way, that movie is awesome for how cheesy it is. I love it. Like, I'm not gonna speak bad of the movie. Just be aware it starts out cheesy and it just keeps getting more and more cheesy. It's great.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
So let's dive into the headline first before we can go any further.
Yes.
So today's headline is off of my favorite website, bleepingcomputer.com. And it basically, the whole story is in the headline. FBI seizes breach forums hacking forum used to leak stolen data. Okay. What does that mean to the average person? Well, let's dive into that. Amy, have you heard of a term called the term dark web? Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Darknet, dark web? Okay. Based on your current understanding, we did, by the way, for those of you listening, we did not prep for this whatsoever, so I'm going to put Amy on the spotlight. What do you think the dark web is?
From what I understand, number one, I don't want to know. I never want to be involved and even try to log on, but there's a certain type of browser that you have to have. You can't get it in the dark web from Internet Explorer. It's like a members only club that you can basically buy literally anything, and you can trade anything. You can access content that the general public cannot access, be it nefarious or just content that's not available. It may not necessarily be bad, because I've heard people say that they go on the dark web for other reasons besides nefarious purposes. I don't know exactly what content that would be, but that's the way I understand it. It's not like you can get in there through Chrome. It's like a very specific browser.
Top notch. I'd say the one thing that may be a little bit of a misnomer. So let's talk about this. And one of the things that I love is just telling people how humans make mistakes, and the world seems to be always geared towards when we don't do things properly. It always goes to the worst possible example. Yeah. I'm a bit of a pessimist sometimes that way. So the dark web started as a Navy project, actually. U.S. government had its hands in there. Yeah. Who guessed? The military might have been behind something, right? No. So it was meant to be a way for militaries to communicate from behind enemy lines using civilian infrastructure in a way that was secure and relatively untraceable. The Navy built out the project, and then, of course, like a lot of projects, they abandoned it midway. Said, hey, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to move on to something else. But what happened is a nonprofit, a privacy-focused nonprofit, said, hey, we'll finish this project. That was the Tor project, Tor. You've probably heard of the Tor web browser if you ever listened to a true crime side press. Okay, they finished it, and they're all about free speech and privacy and all. The idea was we'll create a safe way for journalists and human rights activists in countries that are oppressed, all other people, to have a way to communicate where they can't be oppressed and shut down, right? And so they built it, and they finished it, and they made it free for the general public. And unfortunately, while I do believe their intentions were pure, what's happened is it's been weaponized, and it's still out there to this day. It's still out there. You can go and Google right now for our audience. If you Google Tor web browser, you can find a website. It's legit. You can download the browser on your computer. It takes about 30 seconds. Boom, you're able to get on the dark web. You're in. And what you're going to find is these websites using military-based development, right, that are basically almost untraceable. User activity is mostly anonymized. They have built versions of eBay. They have built versions of Amazon. All these things you think of, right? And what's the big thing over the last few years, money-wise, that's changed in our world? Like, what's the one thing that
Crypto.
Oh my gosh. Now you've got a way to spend money that's way harder to trace than US dollars. And so that created this perfect storm where marketplaces started popping up, right? And that's the main way these criminals are making money. They're buying and selling stuff. So what this article is sharing here is basically exactly what we're talking about. The FBI seized a notorious one of these marketplaces. It's called the breach forums, where people were dumping stuff of how to hack, how to do this, how to get in touch with someone who can sell you tools, who can do mercenary work for you. You can hire hackers for sale for $600 a day kind of a thing. Like, you can do all this kind of stuff. And so they took over this, which is a great news. The problem is it's sort of like a giant game of whack-a-mole where one goes down, 3 more come up.
They're probably already prepared for that, right? I mean, probably have a backup to the backup to the backup. So when that gets shut down, they'll just open up. I would assume if they're smart business people, that's,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly how they do it. So they this happens all the time in cybersecurity land and cyber criminal world, and they're usually ready to go, especially the bigger operators. They've got 2 more websites ready to spin up and ready to go. Sometimes the operators get arrested. It's very rare, but they do, and that disrupts it. But what we found is it just keeps growing. And unfortunately, the napkin math makes sense, I think, in the sense. If you steal, we talk about data leaks and all this other fun stuff, right? Like, why would someone steal social security numbers? Are they going to commit identity fraud themselves? Maybe, but honestly, probably not. They just want to sell it to someone who that's all they do. It's like in our world where marketing data, great example of that, right? If you live in the world of business to business, you know that sometimes when you're selling stuff on your online widget, the metrics of who buys what, even if it's anonymized, that's super valuable. Like, you can go out and sell that stuff. And a lot of businesses do. Criminals figured out the same thing. Driver's licenses, social security numbers, day of birth, phone numbers, addresses, email addresses, all this stuff is fair game for them now. And so instead of them doing all the hard work and sitting there like, I have to run the scam, they can go to marketplaces like this and just sell to somebody who that's all they do and make a quick buck.
And a fraud prevention department of a bank told me once, I had some problems just on a personal level. I had problems with my information getting stolen, and the fraud prevention advocate told me that a lot of times all they need is the credit card numbers. They'll find a way to get the rest, or they only need your first. They only need the last 4 digits of your social to make everything else complete, and that can be procured elsewhere. If they buy this information, it may not be complete, but it doesn't take a lot for a criminal to come up with the rest of the matching puzzle pieces in order to make it complete. That's what they told me years back, and so I can't imagine what levels that can be taken to when professionals are involved doing it. You know.
So you're pretty lay person at this. I'm going to ask you a pointed question for our audience, right? Like, a lot of people are asking, well, the FBI shut this down, right? It does the problem solved. I'm sure, and that's fair. I would say that too. Other than the fact that they keep spinning these out, one thing I noticed in this is I don't see any mention in this article about anybody being arrested, right? Like, nobody was arrested. The people actually running the site appear to be at large still. I'm going through this right now trying to confirm that. But yeah, it looks like they got access to the site and took it down. They didn't arrest the people. Why do you think that might be? Like, why weren't the people arrested?
So, from a true crime knowledge standpoint, a lot of times I hear stories that the federal authorities.
I'm sorry. One person was arrested. I found out.
Okay.
One person was arrested. It's admin Connor Fitzpatrick, aka his username was. Oh man, that's a hard one. Pom Pom Purin is how it goes. Pom Pom Purin.
Well, I think they're taking old Pom Pom and they're taking him in to kind of help take down the higher ups in this crime ring. And that's a lot of times what happens with federal, not just federal crime, but with the criminals. They don't necessarily make arrests right away because they're waiting for more evidence. They're waiting in order to get the big fish. So that could, and they may not announce, they hold a lot of information close to the vest on these types of things. So just because they're announcing this and they're announcing one arrest, they may already have other people in custody that they don't want their cohorts to know that these, and sometimes they'll even pretend to be the people. They'll gain access to the systems, pretend to be that bad actor. And so the other bad actors aren't tipped off. At least that's what I've heard from my true crime knowledge, but I don't know.
No, that's totally valid. And that absolutely could be what's going on
here.
It's
because they're so slippery and it's hard to catch them. It's hard to make the arrest.
What was it? There was a famous case back in the early 2010s called a group called LulzSec. That's what they're called, LulzSec. And that's exactly how that went down. The leader got arrested and he flipped, and they waited on arresting everybody else. So that does happen from time to time. And I would say that's probably the best case scenario in this scenario, right? Like, I hope that there is arrest coming. Let me ask you one other question. Do you think, what's the biggest problem with enforcing cybercrime? Let's start there. Like, in terms of how do you get this? We talked about one, which is the dark web and anonymity. There's actually another one. What do you think that would be? Oh, you're muted, Amy. Sorry. You're muted. Amy, you're muted. Oh, I guess it went off. Well, for our listeners, the second one would be, honestly, quite frankly, extradition treaties. A lot of these criminals are operating in different jurisdictions, different countries, and a lot of these countries don't have extraditions with countries like the United States. So what we're finding, it looks like in this case there is, but you might have actors of a gang that are operating in multiple countries. And yeah, they hang on a second. Can I unmute you? It looks like you muted yourself. If you go to the bottom left-hand corner and see the mute button, okay, your mic might have unplugged. But yeah, no.
I couldn't. I just couldn't click the button. Sorry about that. But I was going to say, I really don't know why, but it makes sense. The extradition. Yeah. These people are smart. They're going to operate just like you were telling me yesterday. Or no, I don't think it was you. I think it was it was Scott. At TTS was telling me about how Venezuela is a hotspot for gaming crime, selling gaming currency.
Yep.
And it makes sense. They don't have extradition treaties with a lot of countries. So these people aren't going to be caught because of that, or they're not going to at least be caught by federal, maybe
any single, it becomes a giant, I'm not saying no one ever gets caught, because it does happen. The problem is it's a risk conversation. I think for a lot of these people, if they're smart about it, they can go under the radar for decades at a time. And that's what we do see. And you combine that with, for a great example of this, we pick on Russia a lot in cybersecurity land. There's a reason for that. Russia has a very strict non-extradition treaty with the United States and other Western countries. Like, they don't extradite Russian citizens. More importantly, and this is allegedly, but allegedly they have basically a blanket policy towards cyber criminals working in their borders that as long as they don't target Russian interests, they only go after the West. Russia doesn't really do a whole lot. Again, this is allegedly. I'm not going to say that, but you put that factor in there. The other thing I would say is the average amount of theft we're seeing. So, great example of this on a personal scam level. A while back, my family was personally scammed. It was a small independent one, about $1,000 online. Someone in my family member was about $1,000. That sucks. Don't be wrong, but that doesn't feel like a lot, right? In the long grand scheme of things, it feels a lot more though when you realize that the average Russian salary in USD for some of these actors is somewhere around like $11,000 a year USD. So that's like a month and a half's worth of pay for my little old scam. Currency conversion is a big problem, and it's the main reason why when we talk with clients, they're like, well, why would someone from Russia come after me? Currency conversion, unfortunately. That combined with geopolitical situation, they make a lot of money for not a lot of risk, and that adds up between you had crypto, the dark web, and an economic model that makes sense. You end up in this weird state where we got a cottage industry on our hands. So I'm going to pull up right here real quick, and this is on the fly. I want to see 2023 cybercrime. Let's just see what source we get. So cybercrime profits. Let's see what happens here. So the IC3 came up first. Let's see what they said. I'm in Bing. That's half my problem. I can't find the clear thing. Going over to Google. Sorry, Microsoft. We're looking at $8 trillion a year right now.
I would think that would actually be underreported. I mean, it's probably underreported, so it's probably actually a conservative number, which is even scarier.
Well, and here's the other thing too. You go to the World Economic Forum, and they actually have projections of what it's going to cost us in the next 3 years. So 2023 was at $8 trillion. By end of 2025, it's supposed to be at $10.5 trillion. And according to the WEF, which I would say is a relatively reasonable source, they're expecting the cost of cybercrime to surge by the end of 2027, which used to sound like a long time. Now that's just 3 years from now.
Right.
$23.84 trillion a year. We're going to see a doubling of activity in the next 3 years based on current trends. That is insane. What is the global economy worth right now? What is that number?
You're asking a salesperson.
Google,
I should know this, but
Google. Let's go ahead and look at this. I think that's something that's fine. Global GDP. I just want to see the global GDP. I think it's going to be $100 trillion right now. So at 8 trillion, we're talking about 8% of the global economy damages right now. That's enough to impact inflation based on my napkin dummy math economy. Like you're paying the bill already, whether you want to or not at that level. Wow.
Yeah.
That's absolutely bonkers.
It's frightening.
So what can our audience do? Hang on. We got to come here. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and pull the resource up. Someone was asking, are you sure it's in the trillions? I'm going to go ahead and pull this up real quick. So cybercrime stats. I was looking at the WEF. So there's 2 resources I will link right now. Cybercrime. Sorry, I had to pull up the cost 2023. I should have shared my screen like a dummy. I didn't. So right now, I'm sorry. I actually got that wrong. It's cost the world. And this is cost, not a profit. Thank you for calling me out on that. So looking at Cybersecurity Ventures magazine, I'm going to share this on our screen right now. We are seeing, no, it's not 1/4 of the economy. So here you go. Share screen. Cybercrime to cost the world $8 trillion, and by 2023, from the Cybercrime magazine is the one resource I was resourcing right here on quick Google, and it's expected to go up 15% by 2025 to 10.5 trillion. So that is the first resource I brought in. Going back, hang on a second, please. WEF cybercrime stats. I hate our new settings, Amy. They keep putting me on Bing. I like Google.
Yeah, I just got to go in there and change that real quick.
It's WEF cybercrime stats. Yep. 2023 was a big year for cybercrime. That's the Forum Institute. Yep, here it is. Got it right here. I'm going to go show this other one right here. So this one is actually from this year. So January 10th, 2024 was the publication date. Yeah, the WEF numbers. Thank you. I'm getting there right now, sir. Thank you so much. Share screen. StreamYard. Yes, that's fine. So yeah, here we go. January 10th, 2024. 2023 was a big year for cybercrime. Here's how we can make it safer. This is from the World Economic Forum. And the global cost of cybercrime went from 8.44 trillion in 2022. They're expecting it to go up by 2027 to 23.84 trillion in damages. Yeah, 10% by 2025 seems too much. Let's take a look here what they said there on this one. So they have a nice little pretty graph. So they're expecting, last year they're saying they saw estimated trillion of 11.5 trillion according to the WEF. They're seeing an estimate 14.57 trillion by the end of this year. And then by 2025, 17.65, 2026, 20.74, and by 2027, 23.82. Paul Bryan is in shock, and I can't say I blame him because those numbers are kind of a nuts. We are seeing this take off as a global cottage industry, Paul, by far. And obviously, this isn't profit for the criminals. We're estimating damages because there is damages surrounding this. If you've ever been involved in a cybercrime incident, like a breach, it gets stupid expensive to address those things and do all the legal paperwork and the IR. So that's probably definitely part of the damages we're seeing here. But yes, according to the WEF, and this is straight from their website, they are anticipating cybercrime to grow somewhere around 23.82%. Oh, Paul says just doesn't believe it. All right, well, that's fair. And honestly, at this point, I would say one of the things that we need to understand too is there's just not a lot of risk for cyber criminals, as we keep coming back to. Criminals measure in risk, right? A drug dealer has to run the risk that sooner or later he's going to get busted on a street corner. If you're robbing banks, you're probably going to get caught sooner or later. We love the stories about the ones who never get caught, but let's be honest, that tends to be it. But yeah, cyber criminals, if you're in Russia and you're coming after a Western country, especially with stuff like generative AI, ChatGPT makes writing English emails, English correspondence half much easier. I actually had ChatGPT the other day write me something in Spanish. It was, according to my brother who speaks Spanish, he said it was a few grammatical errors, but it wasn't terrible. And that was the free version. I was like, oh, good enough. So what should our listeners do? Oh, go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
I was just going to say, You know, just let's talk about, since we do know more about the way drug organizations, organized crime in the drug trade are structured and how they work. I mean, we've got narcos. I mean, we learn a lot, you know, even though. So the thing is that so much more mysterious is the way that these cybercrime rings are structured. So I'm just curious, you know, is it like it is with a drug distribution? You've got your
Yeah.
you know, your hierarchy, and then your big guys are the ones that never get caught. So yeah, it has to be the same, right?
So there's a whole cottage industry here, and I can go down the rabbit hole, but understand that a lot of this has moved into a SaaS style business at this point, which means it used to be a cyber criminal, you had to have a certain technical skills, you had to be good at hacking, you had to have programming to a degree, you had to go ahead and actually have, you know, some kind of certain moral bent, let's say, a certain moral bent. So all these issues had to converge, and there was only so many hours in the day. So yeah, we've been hearing about hacking and cybercrime for over a decade now, but it was never this bad. It feels like it really picked up in the last 4 years. And that really was because of a business model change. A lot of the technical people said, look at companies like Microsoft, look at companies like Google, look at companies like Amazon. They are creating really complex platforms. Like, let's just use Gmail, for example. Do you have a Gmail account, Amy?
Oh yeah.
I have one too. I have one too, right? It is a dead simple tool to use. Yeah. It's click and point, but it wasn't simple for Google to build. So what did Google do? They just built a super, really easy to use platform as click and point and started selling subscriptions to it. If you're on the paid model, which several companies are, it's very clean and easy to use. Cybercriminals said, hey, why don't we do that instead of exposing ourselves to cybercrime and all the risks and legal stuff that may incur? We'll just sell the tools, make more money that way. And that opened up basically anybody can get into it now. As we talked about, it's not that hard to install the dark web browser on your computer. It's a Tor web browser. There are forums now on the dark web where if you just get a link to know where to go, you can get trained on how to do half this stuff. They have support groups, for Pete's sake, on these things of, hey, this worked for me. Did this work for you? It is a full-blown cottage industry. Now, one of the stats I would like to see, and to his point here, let me see here real quick. I'm trying to find the FBI IC3 report is the one I like to reference for a lot of this stuff. That's another one that talks about costs and damages. Yeah, Paul Bryan, you're convincing me to become a cyber criminal. I know, right? Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, man, I might be on the wrong side of this, but I'm like, I like being able to sleep at night with my own sense of morality. Let me see here real quick. I'm doing this on the fly, guys, so forgive me. So the IC3 report did come out in March. So losses surge. It looks like actual profit losses are the ones that are right now. So let's see here. This is insurance losses. This is not the same as cybercrime losses. Never mind. I'm going to scrap this one. This one says just with the insurance reported losses. So one of the things that you can look at, and to Paul's point, while the WEF numbers are kind of shocking, I'll give Paul that. It was absolutely kind of shocking. I will say this. The cybercrime stuff does make sense to me. Like as a business owner, Amy, what I'm talking about here, right? If you can make money at the levels we're talking about, repeatedly and predictably, especially when you live half a world away and you never have to see the face of the person you're impacting, there's a little part of me that says, yeah, that makes sense. As bad as it is to say that, that makes sense. Am I alone?
I get it. Everybody has their price. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure the overhead is a lot lower than, you know, to have a brick and mortar business and have payroll and all of that. It makes sense.
So, okay, what should we tell our audience then, right? Like, I do want to make awareness, and we are all about raising awareness, but I think the things that we want to tell our audience, what can they do to protect themselves? What kind of things should they be looking out for? Well, first and foremost, there's some basic stuff you're going to hear from any kind of cybersecurity person. Things like, make sure you don't use the same password for everything when you log into stuff. Turn on that thing called multi-factor authentication on your big accounts, right? Your email, your bank account, your social media, where it sends that ping to your phone when you log in. And then last but not least, if you're in business, one of the things I've been strongly advising, and I am not in the insurance space at all, to be clear. I do not sell insurance. I don't do insurance, but I am recommending companies. So that is losses reported publicly, Paul, and that's fair. That is the IC3 report. That's also companies that go on the record, though, It's not damages altogether. That's just what costs them. There is economic damages surrounding that. We should do a whole episode, Amy, on data versus what's reported publicly versus what's estimated. That's a great idea. Like, that's a whole thing I'm not prepared to talk about right now, but we should go ahead and do that for that exact kind of questions. I understand where Paul's coming from when they look at the WEF's numbers versus the IC3 and the large disparity. I know there's nuance there. We should definitely do that. What do you think?
Maybe Paul can help us.
Yeah, cool. I'm down with that. But one of the things, back to my original thing, cyber insurance is a good idea. I'm a big fan of that, where, you know, I want to have an insurance policy that helps me sleep at night. For example, my errors and omissions policy as a business, if I give a bad piece of advice that costs one of my clients, you know, a lot of money, I want to know I have an insurance policy to cover that. Same thing with general liability. Someone slips and falls in my place of work and, you know, breaks a bone. Like, we all know to carry that. I would say cyber is getting up there now for most B2B businesses and any kind of business with a technology presence. It's a good one to carry on your policy deck. And that's just speaking from a layman's point. So what are your questions? Oh, Paul said, sure. All right, Paul, we might be reaching out to you, man.
Yay.
Let me see. Paul's really in on this. I want to see Paul's profile real quick. Sorry, Paul, I'm going to stalk you. I'm going to stalk you for a second. My bad, man. Oh, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
I want to know what Paul thinks about that you asked me what to do about what's Paul think, because obviously he knows what he's.
Well, and that's to be fair to Paul, not to put him on the spot, there's a lot of things you could do, I think. We could be here all day talking about that, but a lot of times it's also too, and I think that
our book.
That's funny, but we're not going to go into that right now. But I think a lot of people have insight in terms of, there's a lot of voices telling you do this, do that, do this, do that. And there's also a lot of data points. Like, we're talking a lot about, like, even on this call, because we just started referencing numbers on the fly and the discrepancies. Who are you supposed to trust? That's a really good question when you're referencing this data. And I think that's what I'm thinking we need to do next on our next episode. Let's go ahead and go into, hey, what are some reliable sources based on what we can tell? And obviously we can have guests speak in and stuff like that, like Paul. But what should people look at? Because Paul brought up a very great point, and I'm going to go back to this. The IC3 report. Oh, Paul says, I agree with what you said. Yay! Thanks, Paul. Our chat's like 30 seconds behind the real talk. But I think Paul brought up a point, which is, you look at like the FBI IC3 report, and the numbers are so much smaller compared to the WEF. Obviously, both are, some people might disagree with me on the WEF. I'm not going to go there. But both are relatively respected sources. So what's the deal, right? I think that's definitely something we should talk about. I will say, from a subjective standpoint, I understand where the costs are coming from, because the average breach that we do. Yes. Paul says, I think companies need to work hard to train staff, especially against synthetic remittance scams. Yes. Education's a big one.
It's a big deal.
It's a big freaking deal. One of the things that I've seen subjectively too is, no matter what the number is, I think it's higher than what most normal lay people would expect. If, for example, you're in business and you get a full-blown breach, like not just someone getting into your email, but actually doing damages into your company. Amy, we talk about this. We do some incident response with a different business of ours, and the cost we typically see for a business that's got like 7 or 8 people, like a small business, I've seen the cost climb to, when insurance gets ready to pay the claim, or when someone's getting ready to find funding to pay for something, anywhere from $100,000 to $750,000, sometimes like $750,000. What kind of expenses an 8-person business usually incur that could even come close to that in a normal daily occurrence? It's very rare. And that's the part where I'm like, man, I do get where some of these numbers come from, being on that side, but you weren't involved in this day in and day out. I could totally understand why you wouldn't even be aware of that. It's just, to Paul's point, some numbers are just off. It feels sometimes you don't know what to trust. All right. Well, I think we're good. We were originally going to go live for like 20 minutes, and we ended up going over. This is a good conversation. Shout out to our, I guess, guests for this podcast. Paul, thank you for commenting on LinkedIn. We love audience engagement on this stuff, especially when we do the off-the-cuff stuff, because it just makes it more fun. One more time, for those of you who don't know who we are, my name is Logan. I'm CEO of TTS. We're a cybersecurity company. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube as the Cyber Risk Guy. I'm joined here by Amy, our most recent. She is our most recent sales development rep, and she's also our fellow. I'm looking for a true crime buff fan in our company for a while. Amy, you're the person that joins. So now you're going to be my true crime buff co-host on this stuff. Take care. Stay safe out there, and we're going to go ahead and hopefully make an announcement soon about our next episode, talking about the numbers.
Bye.